And we are recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome to TGI, the greatest indoor reading series, formerly known as The Great Indoors, until it occurred to, or I found out that that is the name of a relatively popular interior design podcast for whom I sometimes get emails. Anyways, I'm Ridge Creswell. I am here coming to you live from Queens, New York, along with show creator Trina Thibodeau. And we have been meeting here every Friday night, except for one, since March, in order to share work, find a little bit of community, find a little bit of emotional connection in a world that is increasingly strange and distanced is what I meant. At any rate, tonight, I would like to thank you all first for joining us on I think it's funny that what has become a day that many people look forward to is known as Black Friday. I feel like that was maybe the name initially just given to it by retail employees who had to, work doubles. But, you know, I think it's more important today than ever, given the things that I saw when I was out and about in my own travels today, um, to do things that are distanced and not be coughing on things at Bed Bath and Beyond or whatever it might be that people are doing today. I think that this is a really good, activity, and it's safe. We all like it. I hope you guys are all staying safe. And just two quick things before we start. If anybody wants to, I highly suggest opening the chat. You can use that as a place for discussion, commenting on the author's works, any of that thing. And also after the show at about 9 o'clock, if you'd like to hang around, ask any questions, talk to each other, network, any of that kind of stuff, we will leave the meeting open for a bit, probably about an hour or so, and people can hang out. So with that, I think we should just dive right in. I don't see any reason to continue prattling. Um, all right. Our first reader tonight is Nancy McCabe. Her memoir, Can This Marriage Be Saved?, was released in September by the University of Missouri Press. She is the author of 5 previous books, including an essay collection, a novel, 2 books about China adoption, and a memoir about childhood reading. Her work has appeared in many magazines and anthologies, including Prairie Schooner, Fourth Genre, Massachusetts Review, Gulf Coast, Michigan Quarterly Review, Newsweek, and Writer's Digest. She has been a blogger for Ploughshares and taught for the Creative Nonfiction Foundation. Her work has won a Pushcart and made notable lists 8 times in Best American Anthologies. She directs the writing program at the University of Pittsburgh at Bradford and teaches in the Spalding School of Creative and Professional Writing Low Residency MFA program. Nancy, you should be able to unmute and take us away.
Thank you. And thank you so much for including me in this series. I've kept trying to pop in on Fridays, and amazingly, I've had like actual emergencies. So many Fridays, it's been incredible, but I intend to come back. So, and I've gotten a really good, the times I've been able to pop in, I've gotten a really good impression. So, but anyway, this is my book, Can This Marriage Be Saved? And I am just going to read some excerpts from it. And I'm skipping a lot, so you're going to notice that there's numbers and there's letters, but I'm skipping some of those numbers and letters. So it's not that I can't count or that I don't know the alphabet, just that I'm, skipping things. Okay. So throughout the book, there are parts that are in the form of a women's magazine quiz. And so that's what you're getting here. So 1, which best describes your reasons for marrying him? A, you have no idea. You were only 20, too young to know what you were doing. B, you have no idea. You were 20, old enough to know better. C, this is what you're trying to figure out. You weren't in love with him. You weren't even attracted to him, even though he was a perfectly nice person, clean and wiry, his prematurely receding hairline and thick brows and goofy humor reminding you of a Muppet, sweet and cartoonish. You felt toward him a fraternal affection. D, you were trying to somehow fill the emptiness that came over you at dusk the months after your first love disappeared. F, your husband-to-be cried the day he confessed to sleeping with an old girlfriend. You were in bed with the flu and you thought, oh good, now I don't have to. He'd brought you milkshakes and roses. He'd played endless rounds of gin rummy. But now he was saying, I'm so sorry. You tried to shrug off the blankets, turn the pillow for a cool spot, but the bedclothes were weighed down by something, his head burrowing into tousled sheets. That's when you realized he was crying, pinning covers against your feverish skin. It's okay, you said, patting his head. G, you were saddened by his anguish, seeing in it your own anguish over your first love, seeing in it all the world's unfulfilled longings. H, he begged you to marry him, and you thought, he's a good person. Someone in the world ought to get what he wants. K, you thought, won't I regret it if my heartlessness drives him away and there's never anyone else? M, your first love failed to reappear and execute a dramatic rescue at the altar. The kind in books and movies where right when you draw back a breath to say, I do, he comes running up the aisle or leaping from the balcony or shouting at the window, and you pinch up the sides of your wedding gown and run to meet him. N, you told yourself that after the wedding, by force of will, you would be attracted to your husband-to-be, that his touch would melt you and give you shivers at the same time, the way your first loves did. O, all of the above. P, none of the above. Q, you're too confused by the tangled mess you've gotten yourself into. You have no idea. 2, true or false? You sometimes feel like you don't really exist. A, wait a minute. Isn't this a question from the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory? What does it have to do with your marriage? B, false. As a child on a swing, the wind rushing by, your stomach lifting and dropping, you used to think with a little thrill, I'm alive, I exist. I exist, you used to think, and the thought caused you to exist in that moment the way the world magically existed when God said, let there be light, and there was light. F, false. When your first love looked at you, you were no longer a ghost. It didn't make sense to you. He was an unlikely hero, a skinny, quiet boy with silky dark hair and long fingers. He wanted to be a priest or a monk, but he changed his career goals and gave you his father's class ring. So big you had to tape around it 20 times to make it fit your finger. He scribbled in the margin of your class notes. Hello, my honey. Hello, my baby. Hello, my sweetie pie. What am I going to do? I'm in love with you. You came across this scrawl while studying and you existed. G, true. You took refuge in marriage and then felt as if you'd erased yourself from the earth. 6, which best describes your courtship? A, when he bet you a steak dinner and then maneuvered to make sure you won, you thought, how nice to have a friend like this, with whom you could go out without any pressure. B, he ordered red wine at a candlelit restaurant before taking you to an old movie at a refurbished downtown theater with deep velvet seats. And you thought, how nice of him to arrange such a fancy evening for a platonic friend, and then to insist on walking you to your door. C, as you inserted your key into the lock, pivoting away from him to push open the door, a kiss apparently intended for your fast-moving lips landed on the side of your face. D, you felt so sorry at him for misunderstanding your intentions, you patted his arm. Later, he said that's how he knew you were interested. E, you felt guilty about your lack of romantic interest, and your guilt drove your niceness up a few notches. Soon you found yourself with him at a Halloween party, dressed like a devil in cardboard horns and a red jumpsuit. Soon you found yourself in a car making out with your husband-to-be who wore a nun costume. And although it all seemed pretty weird when you caught glimpses of your chin or forehead in the rearview mirror, your transparent self in the windows, you thought, that girl looks like a normal person making out with a guy in a VW Bug with fake fur bucket seats. 8, why have you stayed married all these years? A, when you walked down the aisle on your father's arm, all the guests were tittering. Your husband-to-be stood before them in a tuxedo and high-top sneakers, dyed black. You told yourself that you loved his humor, even if at that moment he was too busy scanning the audience, enjoying his joke, to watch you. You felt unreal anyway, as if you were only masquerading as a bride. Later, you and your husband cut the cake and you threw the bouquet, which bounced off the low ceiling, uncaught. And then the skies opened and everyone clapped and cheered because rain on the day of a wedding was good luck. Secretly, you felt beyond the influence of luck, unreal, like a character in someone else's story, speeding into an unknown dark future. You stared at your bright little star of a diamond and remembered from astronomy class why it was impossible to travel faster than the speed of light. Something about gaining mass the faster you went, slowing yourself down. But if you didn't rush ahead, accumulating the weight of all of your regrets, who knew where you would find yourself? B, even when the two of you argued because he came home too late, smelling of beer and smoke, you were married. C, He missed your family birthday dinner, leaving you to blow out candles and make excuses for him, but you still took marriage seriously. I, when he talked about divorce, you were afraid. You didn't know what would become of you. 9. Why would your husband say that he married you? A, because he said the first week he liked being in love. B, because he said the first week he wanted to wake up to you every day. C, because he said 5 years later he'd been afraid of the future. 10. Why do you doubt the future of your marriage? B, he said he married you because he was afraid of the future. D, because your life has begun to unroll behind you like paper towels falling downstairs. You will stop saying who, how, why, and start saying because, and it will all seem as simple as those quizzes in women's magazines that you're fond of taking, except that the causes will seem like they will never end. They might go on unwinding behind you your whole life. F, you tracked down your first love, who told you what you somehow never knew, a fact that absolved you in an instant of years of self-blame. I'm gay, he said. Oh, you answered. Your head went light. All of you was light, like in the final moment before an airplane touches ground, when the body lifts slightly from the seat, levitating. Then you landed gently in your life. 11. How could you never have suspected that he was gay? A, because you were teenagers in 1970s Kansas, and no one you knew talked about this possibility, ever. Except once he did tell you that he doubted his sexuality, and you thought it meant he didn't have any. G, because back then, unlike now, you weren't ready to understand how you could love someone but feel no desire. Answer key. If most of your answers were A through Q, you and your husband will be mature and civilized as you set each other free. You will help him pack. You will transport boxes to his new place. As you leave for another load, he will flick on the porch light. That light will glow in your rearview mirror as you drive away, shrinking to the size of the diamond you still wear. That porch light, not you, will greet him at night from now on. You'll both be kind and sad. You'll talk about how you've outgrown the relationship, an easier explanation than that you were never really in love with him. You will type your own divorce papers, which require that one of you sue the other. You'll apologize profusely, but secretly enjoy the power of being the one who sues him. Taking decisive action is such a relief, you'll feel inspired. You'll pick an argument on the phone. He'll get so angry, he'll hurl the receiver, then the entire phone. His line will go dead. At 3 a.m., you'll meet in the parking lot of a 24-hour IGA whose sign blinks steadily above your heads. You will yell at each other while he shakes the ruined phone at you, its innards a visible scramble of metal. Curly cord lassoing the air, detached rotary dial frisbeeing across the lot. All at once, you'll feel alive. You'll exist. You'll accuse him. To punctuate a point, he'll slam the phone's remains onto the car seat, but there is no crash, no cacophony of trap bells, just the pathetic little ding of a fading ringer. And suddenly you'll double over, laughing, and after one bewildered beat, he'll join you. And there you'll be, alive, existing, afraid of the future, in a 24-hour grocery store parking lot at 3 a.m., laughing and laughing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nancy. That was wonderfully structured.
Thank you.
To sort of unwind it really slowly. And so many of those, examples were things that, in relationships, either I've experienced or I've heard about people experiencing, like very relatable. And I just really refreshing way of sort of unspooling that. Did this, I guess I'm curious, like everybody knows about these sort of like Cosmo quizzes and things like that often are multiple choice quizzes that reduce really complicated life things to like 4 answers. How did you sort of think to structure things this way for some of the chapters?
So I love the fact that you used the words unwinding and unspooling to describe it. So I feel like you totally got what I was going for. That's always certifying. But what happened is I had written this in many, many different ways. I'd written it as a novel. It was actually my PhD dissertation, but then I started writing creative nonfiction, and I tried writing it as a straight memoir, and I never felt like I had the structure, down. It never felt like I had figured out what was going to work, because it just felt so episodic, And then a magazine editor sent out a call, wrote to me and said, "Hey, we're looking for stuff for the do-it-yourself issue of our magazine. And would you be willing to write something? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. And then for some reason, I was going to do something else, but this kept nagging at me. And I thought, I want to do this in the form of a women's magazine quiz. And there is no way it's ever going to work, but I'm going to try it. And so I tried it and I kind of liked it, even though I knew it was really bizarre. And so I sent it to the magazine and the editor wrote back and said, well, I really love this, but everybody else thought that there is no way a women's magazine quiz is going to be 16 pages. Mm. And I was like, but it's not really a women's magazine quiz. You know, I mean, it's written by somebody who was shaped by those. And so it's thinking of her life and the notion of cause and effect. And it felt to me like the quiz kind of brought that out a little bit better than, you know, I had been able to in the past. But basically I had boiled down the whole memoir into this quiz and I was like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm not going back to it, you know. Mm. And then over time, I was like, well, you know, maybe I could do another essay. I mean, I published this piece and as just an essay, which was called Can This Troubled Marriage Be Saved? A quiz. And then I just started writing other essays from other material, like in the form of a how-to essay, an instruction manual, in the form of a series of Bible study notes, in the form of a curriculum guide. So it felt to me like I was able to, like by playing with that material, I was able to bring out the humor of something. I mean, I'm definitely writing about difficult experience, but I think that the formal play helped to bring out the humor of it also.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also there's an interesting echo of like, if only young women had been warned about this kind of experience in the magazines when they were teenagers, maybe things would have turned out differently as well. So I think it works really, really well. That's great. So the book is available now as of September.
Yes.
That's awesome. I think Noli has a link she just put in the chat. So, and your website and Twitter, everything's there. So people go catch up with Nancy and find out more. So thank you so much, Nancy. Really appreciate it. That was great.
Thank you.
All right. Our next reader is Ace Boggess. Ace is the author of 5 books of poetry: Misadventure, I Have Lost the Art of Dreaming It So, Ultra Deep Field, The Prisoners, and The Beautiful Girl Whose Wish Was Not Fulfilled, as well as the novels States of Mercy and A Song Without a Melody. His writing has appeared in Harvard Review, Notre Dame Review, Mid-American Review, Rattle, River Styx, and many other journals. He received a fellowship from the West Virginia Commission on the Arts and spent 5 years in a West Virginia prison. He lives in Charleston, West Virginia. His 6th collection, Escape Envy, is forthcoming from Brick Road Poetry Press in 2021. Ace, you should be able to unmute and take it away.
Hello. Thanks for having me. And thanks to Marissa for suggesting me. I'm going to jump around a bit. As you said, I was locked up for a little while. And while I was locked up, I wrote this book, The Prisoners. Most of the poems were published while I was inside and got my acceptance for the book on the day I got out. This first poem, the thing about prison is the food is so bad, inmates don't know what to do with it. So rather than sample one piece of horrible tasting meat and some rotten vegetables, they'll just pile everything into a mound like that mashed potato mountain in Close Encounters. It's a really strange thing to see. This is called The Prison Chefs. They compile their pizza breads from everything, composing chromatic symphonies, chaos, string cheese over garlic loaf, carved sticks of beef and stir fry, iron ore from meteorites, the clipped fingernails of God. Into their soups go saltines and syrup, corn chips, potatoes, and refried beans. An alphabet stew hardened like words and wrapped in scrolls of papyrus to be swallowed whole like a bitter brimstone sermon. Their sandwiches, sweet mercy, empty all the commissary shelves. Spice and sausages, pickles, sardines, peanut butter and cookie crust, whatever mustard and mayo won't conceal. They are artists, they are ghouls, making of Renfield a Wolfgang Puck. They could cook the delight from a birthday cake, rob it of richness and fill it with rocks, then devour it brick by painted brick, as if redemption might be lost with any crumb that tumbles from their plate. I write a lot of poems using questions for titles. While I was locked up, I was the inmate rep, and people would come to me all the time with this question. Can they do that? They can feed you pulverized bones of rat, but not the eyes or hair. They can softly submerge your face in the sink, never the toilet without a showing of cause. They can sing country western songs all night, off key as you try to sleep, rap on Fridays, rhythm and blues in the afternoons, though heavy metal would violate your rights. They can laugh at your inadequacy. They can kick you, but only when you're down. They'll seduce your wife with white roses and tales of your exploits floundering like a bear with no arms and broken wings. On a good day, they might leave you alone. A good day for you, for they have none. They can spin you in a centrifuge, dress you in dresses, dance on your grave, can tie your shoelaces in a knot. Don't say they cannot. Then lock your fingers in a Chinese puzzle so you struggle until you disappear. A Theseus walking threadless into a maze. And the last one I'm going to read from this book was based on a real conversation that I had, or that I joined, I should say. The conversation's got pretty strange in there. It's called The Perfect Murder. Gas explosion, says the shorter of the two inmates. Sad smile, greasy Elvis hair, and you can tell he's considered it. Measured the hiss and stink, the spark, the why and for whom he doesn't let slip. Hole in the line, he says. Then boom, it burns away all trace. Nothing the other suggests seems as interesting. Car wreck, sleeping pills, several other versions of fire, like smaller caliber bullets without the bright and bloody big bang of their betters. Even this back and forth is tense as a Hitchcock film. So I interject. No, the best weapon's still a deadly scorpion. You can't get fingerprints off of a deadly scorpion. Setup, waiting for the question. Finally, the taller one gives in. Why can't you get fingerprints off a scorpion? He says. I say, because they don't have any fingers. As the hard, embarrassed silence of one and Tommy gun laughs of the other reshuffle their dreadful tarot deck of a dialogue. It's like that scene in Psycho, when you first realize it's Norman Bates wearing his mother's clothes, and you don't know whether to giggle, gasp, or softly readjust your ashen wig as you sink down lower, ever lower in your seat. This is my new book, Misadventure. Came out this year, right at the start of the pandemic. Not good timing. I'm just going to read one from this one. I love this piece. It's one of two I have tonight about quirks of modern technology. This is called Amazon.com recommended my book to me. An email offering, you might also like, a name I knew. Cover scanning 12 billion light years seen from smallness of the prison yard. I smelled warm paper and heated dust on my plasma screen. Tasted my laughter like soda and smoke. Was this success? Some cruel joke? The ideal reader for me is me. My temperament well suited for my words. I have an audience lined up, staring back from the existential mirror, self examining, self discovering, self fulfilling. I'm a Midas whose touch morphs all into me. My words come back like songs from favorite childhood Disney films. Ooh, I want to be like you. No, I want to be like me. To read and remember times I needn't sell me for good reviews, stars, and love. Though I do love me back, and love me too. I have two others I'm going to read, and these are from my new book, Escape Envy, which should be out early next year. First one is a little political. Negative definition. Imagine my philosophy prof from 1990, sophomore year, his crescent haired lagoon of scalp, his monotone Eeyore voice saying, "Don't think about the president. You can't not. When you consciously attempt to conjure a negative, you summon its opposite. Don't think about the head of state," I tell myself. I try, but there he comes, strutting dumbly across my screen, as though I've pulled him from a hat, and now must listen to him jabber about what a wonderful hat it was, and how he built the best burrow in a secret pocket in the brim. Don't think about him, I plead. But bedazzled brain invites his image on the news, where other loud men draft the chronicle of lies, arguing over their meanings, as if a crucial line of verse from Frost, a voice from memory, droning and deliberate, advises me, just don't think. I cut it off there and put in an effort, as though studying for the blank page of an exam. But not thinking doesn't work, and too many others have beaten me to it. And isn't that the trouble? Isn't it? Anyway, didn't my old professor really say, don't think about polar bears? Now, I'm doing that. I'm not thinking about them. I'm not thinking about them as hard as I can. I'm going to close with this another miracle of technology piece. One of the first things I did when I got out was, of course, sign up for Facebook, which had come out while I was locked up. And now I get this frequently on Facebook. Facebook keeps telling me I should be friends with my ex-wife, extend handshake and chivalrous salute, as if we might hang out somewhere between servers and play gin rummy, digital checkers, as if not enemies isn't enough. We have to like each other and our posts. Her face appears sadly smiling on my screen like a phantom. Add friend, the social network strong arms me, demanding I send a new request, as though she wouldn't request in turn 20 years of her life back. And I wouldn't find it too disturbing to read about her relationship status, thumb through pictures of her travels to beaches, zoos, concerts, cathedrals, with whomever might prove martyr enough for love. I'm too busy regretting. Also trying to forget and dancing in a dark and empty room while wondering how I should pitch Facebook on an add not enemy button for those we'd rather not know, except we do. Thank you.
All right, Ace, thank you so much. That was a really wonderful breadth of work, and I really like the use of humor. You know, that line, and it's similar. You know, Nancy had some of this in memoir-ish. You know, in this case, in the form of poetry, but based on some of your real experiences. It does benefit greatly from that tension of, you know, really dire seriousness and the fact that funny things happen at the weirdest times, or there's
They
humor to be
do.
found in things. Yeah. And I guess it's I'm uh regarding just the first book, so you wrote that while you were incarcerated and managed to get it published from there.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's were you a writer previous to your problems with the law?
Yeah, my first book, The Beautiful Girl Whose Wish Was Not Fulfilled, came out in 2004, and then
Okay,
I got locked up in 2006.
gotcha. I was just curious because people often find, I think, I'm sure you still found a great deal of self-reflection, during your time there, and
Oh yeah,
I
and I had to start over too. I
yeah, yeah, and I
didn't
can
have
hear.
access to all my files and
Mm,
volumes of poetry.
right. So you just had to kind of figure it out. But I think the thing about the food is I can hear in it almost I'm maybe I'm overreaching, but I feel like I can hear your mind sort of trying to make sense out of what's happening in front of you, like this, and just process this experience and this information, and even later on, coming out at this most recent one, I mercifully have been off of Facebook for a few years now. I had to just cut it. I couldn't do it. But yeah, like at the same it's the same thing. Like, we're presented with these baffling circumstances, um and information that we don't really know what to do with, and then we have to kind of try to work it through. And I really loved hearing that sort of process in your poetry, and how there were ramps that maybe implied a great deal, but you didn't quite take because you ended up going this way. It was really, um, really thought provoking, I guess is the best thing to say, and
Thank,
funny. Yeah,
thank you.
sure. And is
I
that
think laughter
go ahead.
is really important to me. It's
Mm,
I mean, I look at everything with the same childlike fascination,
mm,
but I try to find something funny in the most horrible moments, and it helps.
sure.
Not just the poetry, but my own brain.
Sure, yeah, it helps us cope with existence. I mean, the don't think about the president thing. I really just a couple weeks, when they called the election results a few weeks ago, there was this marvelous few days where there wasn't a news story about his stupid Twitter or anything. We were just free for like 72 hours. And it was amazing. So I totally got that. Hopefully we get more of that in the future. But yeah.
Soon.
Yes. Well, we're fingers, toes, any appendages we have crossed. Anyway, Ace, there's a link to Misadventure is or a link to, I think, most of your books, and then the newest one, Escape Envy, will be out early next year.
That's right.
All right. Well, let us know and come back on and read us some more from that. That'd be wonderful.
Would be happy to. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah. Thanks very much. All right. We are rocking and rolling. That's somewhat embarrassing to say. The more that I become just an adult white man, the more I hear dad stuff coming out of my mouth, even though I'm not a father. It just happens. Anyways, our next reader is Patti M Hall. She is an author, collaborator, book coach, and project manager for exceptional writers and transformational leaders. An experienced nonfiction and memoir editor and sought after ghostwriter, Patti has shepherded a dozen books to publication in both traditional and self publishing. She is the author of Loving Large, a mother's rare disease memoir. Patti, you should be able to unmute yourself and go for it.
Give it a go. Thank you for having me. I hope I bring the lone Canadian accent tonight. You guys all have your wonderful regional accents. So I think I have like the Great Lakes sort of accent, but I don't have a president to complain about. But we watch pretty closely, just so you know. So I'm north of the border. So Loving Large came out right as the pandemic started. In fact, it was already printed and shipped to bookstores that then closed for 4 months. And I have no idea if it's ever been in a bookstore. I've never signed one. I've literally never seen it out in the world, which is not anything anybody wants to experience, but first world problems, right? The piece I'm reading is chapter 9. It's called Vigilante. The context I'll provide is very early in the book. My son is then almost 16. He's diagnosed with an uber rare disease, which there will be hints of in the chapter. It's a famous disease that everyone knows about, but nobody actually knows how it's caused. And this is about in the middle of the book, so I thought I'd read this chapter. Little drama, little comedy, and some visual humor for those of us that like the dark stuff. Vigilante. By April, our lives consisted of hospital days and non-hospital days. On hospital days, Aaron plodded along in his own long strided pace, staying just a foot or two in front of me, close enough that I almost tripped on his heels when our feet got out of sync. He navigated obstacles at ceiling height that the rest of us wouldn't even notice, like the lit up exit sign and those pointing to washrooms, elevators, and clinics. The ones fixed in place and not swinging from eyelets were particularly dangerous for Aaron. He'd push a door open by spreading his fingertips out and pressing at its very top corner, while his thigh hit the push bar that was at my waistline. The long, bent arm of the hydraulic box might have taken out his eye if he wasn't paying attention. His hat could be knocked off, but he had it. He had this. His world, he had it all figured out. In the early hospital days, he walked behind me through the innumerable institutional hallways. But once he knew the way, he liked to go ahead so that he could yank open the doors, push all the buttons, and grasp all the handles. It was something he'd done as a little boy, too. Some proof of our lessons and manners had paid off, maybe. Or he was just the kid who has to be in charge. More likely that. When I walked in front, I could see where we were going. Otherwise, my only view was the big red wall of Aaron's back. Even at 5'6" I was easily shrouded behind my giant son. But back there, as he careened through crowds, I didn't have to see people stare at him. And they did stare. They didn't just glance up and then retrain their eyes on the floor. They looked at the baby-faced, nearly 7-foot tall guy and ran their eyes up and down him, maybe to confirm they weren't imagining or that he wasn't in costume, on stilts, or being carried on someone's back. Maybe they thought some circus entertainers had come to cheer up the residents. Up and down again, back to me, where I'd come into view, up to him, repeat. I guess when someone's head is only a couple of inches from the ceiling, it draws attention, everyone's attention. They couldn't help but look, but it hurt me. I didn't know what it was doing to him. I'd always been terrified of conflict, but now I was provoked into making eye contact with the staring people. I hoped my glare would draw their ogling back to me, away from Aaron. In enclosed spaces like elevators and waiting rooms, folks softened a little. They stared but tried smiling in our direction, as if cognizant of their rudeness and preparing to meet Aaron's gaze if he looked up from his phone, computer, or book. Sometimes, if I judged their intentions to be genuinely kind, I'd quell the tension by blurting out something friendly. But they weren't always kind. There were the whispers, and then these were the worst, the gawkers, who elbowed the person beside them and nodded towards Aaron so their friend wouldn't miss the show. There were also the pointers and the people who tried to take a selfie, sidling up next to Aaron, aiming their phones up to their own face, and then tipping them just enough to capture Aaron in the frame. In elevators, the food court, and on the subway, those were the worst of all. People weren't cruel 99% of the time, but they offered a horrifying study in human behavior and regular, blatant reminders of our societal obsession with difference. I added a 1-inch turquoise binder with a magnetic clasp to the stack of notebooks that I took with me everywhere. It held essential test results, referral letters, and a cheat sheet of locations and phone numbers of doctors' offices and labs. I really could have used a smartphone back then. I started keeping a Word document with dates, measurements, weights, and hormone levels, not only because I couldn't remember, my brain was rapidly turning to mush, but because I'd already learned that passing it to the person creating a new chart or doing a pre-consult for the next specialist could achieve priority 1, minimizing Aaron's frustration. I didn't want us bickering about accuracy in front of someone. I didn't want us to be that pain in the ass family that grosses in the office while the doctor is trying to get to the important facts. I knew that my diligence on this front worked because the follow-up letters sent from one specialist to another described Aaron as a polite young man and a well-mannered teenager. They were more likely to make recommendations quickly and go out of their way for that kind of child and his congenial, well-informed mother. And I needed that tactical edge. We were becoming good entertainment too. We were developing a bit of a shtick and the comedic timing of a pair who'd done stand-up together for a long time. How tall is he? A stranger or new doctor, nurse, or lab tech would ask me. almost never addressing him. 6'6" or so, I'd say, audible gasp. That was his height at in the early medical days, but the second digit changed to 7, 8, 9, 10, and finally 11 in time. Will he get any bigger? Yep, he's still growing. Then to Aaron, they might say, do you play basketball? Only if you're a Raptors recruiter. He had a vast repertoire of responses. My personal favorite was, no, I'm a jockey. That always left them with their mouths hanging open, and the delay while they figured out the size humor gave us time to make our escape. We knew how to tailor our material to the audience, whether they were little kids, groups of teens, kindly older people, or name-tagged hospital personnel, and to the particular look on the face of the gawking person. We could meet the rude, demeaning ones right where they stood. These ones would often look at Aaron and then more than a foot down at me and ask, how'd he get so tall? I'd be the straight man. He's a giant, like Andre the Giant. Well, how'd that happen? The person might then ask, as if inspired by some movie plot about alien babies or gigantic man-eating plant pods. I was breastfed, Aaron would lob in. Poker-faced, we'd both step off the elevator and then giggle our heads off as we sauntered down another hospital corridor. Keeping us fun together was easy. It always had been. And so little was left unchanged when we clung to the goofiness and humor that was the bedrock of our connection, me and my boys. Meanwhile, I ran battlefield scale maneuvers in my mind while I went about my daily life. I had to be doing something related to Aaron's medical situation all the time. A backward glance now shows me that my intentional exertions weren't always what moved things along. Sometimes it was chance. I would research random medical references I saw dropped in online stories, and then the universe, another comedian, would plop the solution in my lap. I was too deeply embedded to recognize that coincidences were opening up treatment options more quickly than anything else. Meanwhile, these evidences of providence confirmed the 6 degrees of separation rule. You know the theory, that if you could map out your network, you'd find you were a handful of steps removed from knowing someone like Queen Elizabeth. Actually, it has a more logarithmic basis, and it's about how humans are all connected by our social relationships. But it wasn't a theory to me anymore. One of the first twists of fate showed itself back at Sick Kids, the hospital in Toronto, after Dr. Lindgren admitted that his team didn't have a surgeon who had performed a transsphenoidal procedure, the removal of tumor fragments using instruments and a camera inserted through the nostrils. So I asked if there was even a surgeon in the entire city that had done one of these. Yes, there is at St. Michael's Hospital. Cusimano does these. I gasped, Cusimano? It couldn't be the same one. Michael Cusimano? You know of him? Dr. Lindgren asked, surprised, I presume, that I would be tapped into a brain surgeon, 411. I actually do, I said, feeling the amazement at the same time as I was saying it. He's my father's doctor, I said, or he was. He cared for my father through a head injury years ago. Michael Cusimano had been the on-call neurosurgeon after my dad was T-boned in a car accident years before and barely survived injuries to his head and one leg. I'd never researched Cusimano's credentials or specialty, and it seemed like a far-fetched fortuity. But if being my father's doctor once was something that could help my child get closer to a clinic consult with an experienced brain surgeon, I'd use it. Of the few dozen neurosurgeons in the region, they all know each other. What was the chance that the one I had a connection to was the one who had the single experience with this type of tumor? Dr. Lindgren left a cell phone message for me. He'd faxed a letter to Cusimano. Hesitating just a little before he signed off, he said, "Oh, and please call back if you don't get the outcome you want." I didn't know what he meant. I couldn't ask a recorded voice. Call him if we don't get get a connection with the other surgeon. Call him if we want to take his team up on their offer to give it a go and cut my kid's head open. Call him if Cusimano screws up. Call him if our kid doesn't make it, gets sicker, if he gets worse news. Was medicine a competitive business too? And if one salesperson sells you a lemon, even if that lemon is your darling child's son, it's his future quality of life, and the sales dude is a surgeon, then will the next one play the "have I got a deal for you" game? It wasn't like I was planning a family vacation and trying to choose between one hotel or the other. I didn't want either. I didn't want my son to need a brain surgeon at all. I wanted brain surgeons to go back to being something I joked about not being when I lost my car keys. there was no chance in hell I was going to get the result I wanted, because what I wanted was for it to all disappear, evaporate, poof, like it never happened. I wanted to sweep the reports, test results, and especially diagnostic images under the thickest, heaviest rug I could find. More than anything, I wanted Aaron to go back to being normal in every way. I wanted him to forget about the dozen doctors and half as many hospitals, about missing school only to tolerate often rude white-coated strangers standing around him and talking about the size of his hands. Oh my God. Thickness of his tongue, I've never seen anything like it. Or unusual hormone levels. Did you see the growth hormone on this kid? I wanted him to knee-jerk respond with his sauciness again when people asked him overly personal questions. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Patty. That is, first of all, your son sounds amazing in terms of his ability to handle things. I guess one could argue he didn't really have a choice, but still,
Yep.
that's. I think it's funny that I made that joke about turning into a dad, just because I, not having kids myself, I can only imagine that for people who have a child who doesn't struggle with like a medical condition, they must want to protect them from, bullying, being picked on, being pointed at, any of that stuff. So for someone who is the parent of someone who stands out, I could hear the care and love there, but I also really liked and respected that I could hear the sort of pragmatism of like, well, yes, but we have to just get through this procedure as fast as we can. We have to make sure this doctor doesn't ask dumb questions and just give them the information. And yeah, I mean, it just sounds like an incredible an incredibly rich experience in many ways for you to be able to share with people. So I appreciate
Thank you
that.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, managing information is a big piece of it, right? I mean, I was already a full-time writer, so writing about it is, writing was already what I did. So, but writing the story when it's yours is infinitely different, right? But managing information for a 16-year-old kid who is no longer a 16-year-old kid, he stopped being a kid and I stopped being a grown-up, pun intended.
Right.
And we met in the middle, and the book is laced with the medical story, but more so this cool thing that happened when you become cellmates together, pun intended, because in every way, rare disease is a lockup. I hope that's a fair allusion, Ace, but we are what we are because of the disease, not in spite of it.
Sure. Yeah.
And now we're pals, and he's older and doing as well as he possibly can. And we still have that ridiculously goofy relationship.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's, again, the humor comes in during the difficult moments, I think. And that sounds, yeah, I would love to read more. I mean, I think that's
Thanks.
the idea of taking that experience and doing what families do when they operate best, which is bonding and getting closer because of it. So thank you so much for sharing that. And
thanks, everyone.
Yeah, there's a link to the book in the chat, so people grab a hold. And as you're the second writer who told us that they had a book launch at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm very sorry. We've had a few people this year who just, like, people who had plane tickets bought for book tours and things like that, and it just crushed everyone's expectations, obviously. So, but everybody, and I'm speaking to myself too, we've watched enough TV. Let's buy a book and read it.
Right on.
All right. Thanks very much, Patty. I really appreciate it. All right. Our final reader this evening is Benjamin Cutler. He is an award-winning poet and author of the full-length book of poetry, The Geese Who Might Be Gods, from Main Street Rag 2019. His poetry has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize numerous times and has appeared in the Carolina Quarterly, Eco Theo Review, and the Lascaux Review, among many others. In addition, Benjamin is a high school English teacher in the southern Appalachian Mountains of western North Carolina, where he lives with his family and frequents the local rivers and trails. Benjamin, you should be able to take it away.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the hosts for having me tonight. And thank you to Marissa. Again, I heard Ace mentioned Marissa, and Marissa was so kind to recommend me, and so I'm very grateful for that. And I am downright daunted to be going last tonight. Such incredible readings by the other three writers tonight. The first two poems I'm going to read tonight are from my book, The Geese Who Might Be Gods. Outside my living room windows, to my right over here, there is a large field, and it's not mine, but I get to look at it. And over the years, I've written a few poems to some of the visitors, some of the wildlife that show up occasionally out there. And this is one of those. This is to the turkey vulture pacing the field. The field has been cut for hay, though not yet baled. And you have noticed your wide-winged shadow, a haunt on this sheet of midday gold, a revenant undeterred by light. I must say, now that you have landed, you look less impressive on your feet, awkward as a potato sauntering through the straw, more turkey than vulture as you nose the earth. You must have found what you were looking for because you have stopped. Some mouse, mole, or cottontail kit. They must have felt safe in their green cathedral, vaulted ceilings of seed-weighted grass, until they could not escape the tractor's indifferent thrash. These carrion do not feel you rip their skin, your bald head burrowing into bowel, or your beak breaking bone. You have waited, as you always do, for the stillness and breathless bloat. And in this, I think perhaps you are kinder than your feather-crowned kin, who kill and bleed their fear-choked prey in flight. But you, eater of the departed, you have finished your quiet meal where it rests, and have again taken flight, casting that same earthbound specter. Though now you seem less ominous, less mysterious, and not so different from the rest of us, with your belly full of dead things and your endless hungry search. Thank you. A few years ago, I was watching, I think it was CBS Sunday Morning News, and I saw a bit on the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. I don't know if any of you've heard of it before. I'm sure you have. But this is the first time I had learned of it, and I was utterly delighted and horrified to learn that such a thing exists, and that we might need it. And I started thinking about what, in the event of the apocalypse, what it is that I might want to have. And I couldn't stop thinking about a good Southern tomato sandwich. And so this is a tomato sandwich for the end times. And it opens up with an epigraph from Svalbard Global Seed Vault at croptrust.org. It will secure for centuries millions of seeds representing every important crop variety available in the world today. It is the final backup, end quote. When the world ends, as the prophets of science, scripture, and pop culture have foretold, you should hope to find yourself on Svalbard, north of the Norwegian mainland, a frozen island where the world is wide enough to seem new. Under the blue frost crust, you will find an embryonic Eden on ice, a cavernous vault of metal and stone where all our seeds are kept. By our, I mean us, all of us, all the seeds, over 150,000 varieties of wheat alone, some high in protein, others tolerant to heat, each species and subspecies at sub-zero temperatures, so that when the end times come, call it Ragnarok, you're in Norway after all, you might still have your bread. And in this apocalypse-ready icebox, every tomato you know and dozens more you don't. Determinate and indeterminate, grapes and cherries, Cherokee purples, the aptly named Arctic rose, enough heirlooms for every family tree lost to flame. To prove you were meant for this era, you'll have to make your sandwich yourself. Sharpen a bone handle knife on a spit-wetted stone and slice your bread and tomato of choice. Without eggs and oil, you'll have to hold the mayo. But the vine-ripened fruit will be sweet enough as you eat alone on a snow mound for one. hope softening against the roof of your mouth. Thank you. I haven't written a lot of poems about the quarantine or the pandemic, although I have done a lot of writing, but I have written one, and this was early on, shortly after lockdown, as I was adjusting to new routines and new schedules. And this is titled Bird Song in the Time of Quarantine. I am living on birdsong, the sunrise reveries of the fog-silvered morning. A busy hour. I've never been still enough to know until now, here. I now know these bright, varied melodies are not music, but the innate, lonesome cries of the world's oldest need. Hear me, find me. But isn't this what every song ever was? I, as quiet as a broken syrinx, will never tire of this din of desire, this wild chorus of the new day's ritual, this riotous waking into song. Thank you. This next poem is a fall language. We're into late fall now, and most of the trees have lost their leaves at this point. So I'm going to read a fall poem for you, a fall language. The trees in fall begin to feel one another for the first time. The wind breathed and leafless bend of branched body against branched body. This sound is nothing like the voiceless dead shudder of bones, but a language. Old summer-held secrets whispered in earnest before the cold and white silence. All they have weathered and wished to weather, each lost leaf a dry and dropped syllable. When there are no green words left to warm us, doesn't all language sound like one desperation rubbing against another? Listen, there's so much left to say, so much left, so much. So we should reach and touch each other with what is bare, with what remains of us, if we are to speak our hope at all. My grandmother died when I was 17 years old, which was, of course, a long time ago at this point. But this poem is for her. It is an elegy. A poet is always trying to craft good metaphors, and we often feel like we fail in doing that, I think. So I decided to lean into that, and this is a poem with failed metaphors. It is titled Elegy with Failed Metaphors. Near the end, Nana bit the end, the tail of a fish. This is not a metaphor. I am tired of metaphors for dying. It already swims in mystery dark waters. Nana, forgetting her southern polished propriety, lifted the fish from the plate and held it between newly polished nails, stilled in a moment of watery misremembrance, then brought the gleaming gray glory to her mouth. This was nothing like a kiss, and gentler than love's young teeth. No, love's barbed hook. No, love's cast net. No, I am tired of metaphors for loving. Near the end, Nana bit nothing. The final stroke left her submerged and swimming in a sea for which we had no map, no ship. Her blue-scaled legs treading memory's black brine, neck stretching for breath, until at last she found the moon-glassed surface. No, the sun-softened shore. No, the ocean's skyless floor. No, I am tired of metaphors, tired of these meatless fins, tired of biting into nothing but bone and skin. This is only dying and loving. We do them every day. Thank you. This is my last poem for the evening. There's been some talk about children here. I have 4 children, which is why I have not been able to attend a Friday night meeting until now. But I've written poems for all of my children. But my oldest, who is 16 now, he pointed out a couple of years ago that I had not written a poem for him. So to my great shame. So I took that as a challenge and I wrote this for him. It is to my eldest at the age of burning, and it opens with an epigraph. This is from Barbara J. King at npr.org. Pigs experience hope, which we know because if raised in decent conditions, they anticipate that pleasurable things will happen to them, end quote. Listen, I once spoke with a man who worked on a pig farm. This labor is not what he wanted, but wanting meant nothing to him, only need. When the farm burned, you could smell the smoked shit and flesh for miles, he said, like someone mistook the smokehouse for the outhouse. His left hand was lame and bandaged, not from blistering, but a needle meant for a pig's hip. His work had been to dose and sort, syringe in one fist, ink in the other, stab and stripe, stab and stripe, stab and stripe, until needle broke against a thumb's thick knuckle. I wasn't working that shift, he said, so I didn't hear their screams, but I imagined them. Listen, can you hear them, son? All those hopeless cries in the orange night. I remember yours at the threshold of your bedroom door, how the disorder had become too much, how a friend's farewell had become too much, how the Adderall had become too much. Stab and stripe, stab and stripe, stab and stripe, your tear-wet face against my chest. I do not have to imagine your cries. We cleaned, your mother and I, clearing and sorting the wreck and waste until, after the hours piled upon years, and almost too late, I found your clutter-buried heart, needful and ablaze, where it nearly set fire to us all. Thank you.
Wow, Ben, thank you so much. I feel like everyone tonight's hit a lot of topics, but there's been this sort of through line of real life experience and making meaning out of it, right? And the other thing I'm struck by and struck, that Trina just said in the chat, parental love. Like I'm struck by these parents who are actually very attuned to their children. This is magnificent. This is very good news. I did I mean, the funny thing about your work is that I loved the phrasing, the metaphors, the brevity, the images. And then I loved that you have a poem where you talk about how you're sick of doing that to these human experiences. Because I can imagine that at a certain point you're like, man, can't I just sit and like feel a feeling without trying to think of a cool way to say it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there's also a majesty to taking, I love birds. I'm big into birds, and I love turkey. I love vultures. I've only had close encounters with turkey vultures and black vultures personally, but I love them. And what I love about them is that they are weird and gross and funny looking and ugly, but they serve this really important purpose of like cleaning things up and returning things to the land and all this stuff. So that one also particularly touched me. I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place, but it's really wonderful stuff. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I love anything about nature, and I love that there are people out there who seem to feel the way that I do in the presence of it, and then thinking the big thoughts, but doing so in a way that is very like clear and communicative and not high flung and I find, for example, I find it hard to imagine you in the classic nature-loving romantic poet sense of like sitting under a tree with your pen and a fluffy shirt or anything. You seem like a fairly down-to-earth person. So
I do occasionally sit under a tree. No fluffy shirts, though.
Okay, well, we know what to get Ben for Christmas, everybody. So your book, The Geese Who Might Be Gods, is available now. And then, do you have anything else upcoming that is sort of on the way to publishing? Anything that has been?
No, just poems forthcoming in various magazines. I have a work in progress, a manuscript that I've recently organized, and I'm getting ready to kind of go in and kill the darlings, as they say, and start sending it out. But no, just the book's the only thing out there for sale right now.
Okay. All right. Well, people know where to find more, and yeah. All right. This has been quite a night. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So wrapping it up real fast, we had obviously you all were here, and anyone who's watched this after the fact has seen we've had a wonderful evening of. Uh, I would say this was more personal than some weeks are. This and that's the kind where I get very not that I'm not invested normally, but there's like an intellectual investment, and then there's a underneath sneaking up under my rib cage and pulling me in kind of thing that happened tonight. So I selfishly would like to thank the readers for that, because I feel I have the best seat in the house and I get to pontificate like a mustachioed madman about it. So that's very fun. Anyway, if you'd like to catch up with the show, you can find us on Twitter at TGIcast, or the best way is actually to just go to tgicast.com. There you will find all the information you need about myself, Trina and Noli, and video archive of old shows, which is woefully out of date. I will fix that soon. And there's a podcast as well. So go there for everything. If you want to reach me directly, you can find me on Twitter at Ridge Cresswell. If you want to find the show's creator, Trina Thibodeau, you can find her on Twitter at Trina Tibbs, TREENATHIBS. And if you'd like to find birthday girl, talent booker, all around good person, best human being in Indiana, Noli Reed. You can find her on Twitter at Noli Reed. Again, if as many people mentioned, they were referred by one of our particular audience members, Marissa Glover, who's a huge cheerleader of ours. If you know someone that you would like to hear or you think would be a good fit, please send them along. You can reach out to Noli for that. She's the scheduler. And I think, you know, we have built a nice social network that has sprung up out of this. And as we always say, and it's becoming the closing line, I'm trying to figure out a way not to shoehorn it in too hard. So what I do is I give a lengthy preamble qualifying why I'm being awkward. This show runs on friendship. So send us your friends that you want to hear. Stay in touch, stay safe, and we will be here every Friday. So come on back. All right. Thank you. Now stop this.